Number one, that was not yelling. I can get a lot louder. And number two, boy, what do you want from me? Are you mad that I didn't come up with actual legislation to help completely overhaul the American tax system in an internet video with a maximum length of 3 minutes? We have Ivy League educated people in Congress who cannot pass a decent law to save their lives. So what, you think me, some random bitch with multiple learning disabilities, is going to be able to do that? That's really asking for too much. But in all seriousness, if it was up to me, I would make a lot of changes, and one of the very first things that I would do would be to better fund the IRS. No one really likes paying taxes, and no one really likes talking about taxes, but that needs to be something that more progressives talk about more often. This is going back in time a little bit, but between 2011 and 2013, the CBO found that the estimated amount of taxes owed but ultimately unpaid was $381 billion on average annually. And a recent academic study found that roughly 70% of the gap is explained by underpayment of the top 1%. And despite the enormous amount of taxes going unpaid by the wealthy and large corporations, Congress has cut overall resources to the IRS by 20%. And so because they've lost all of this funding and all of this staffing, they're not able to properly audit a lot of these big billionaires and corporations. And of course, Republicans attempt to portray these cuts as a populist move against the IRS because it's not a popular agency. And yes, everyone kind of fucking hates the IRS, but because of these cuts, the real impact has been to open up the floodgates for the wealthy and corporations to avoid or even evade the taxes that they owe. Which is super interesting because you know how conservatives are always screaming about the deficit and how that's a really big problem and we need to get the deficit under control? Well, this same CBO report also found that increasing IRS funding by just $20 billion over the next 10 years would actually decrease the deficit by $40 billion. So it's super interesting how all those quote unquote fiscal conservatives who just love to bring up the deficit every time someone wants to pass a law to help average Americans. It's interesting how all those conservatives who are really concerned about the deficit are opposed to funding an institution that would actually help us get the deficit down a little bit. They don't actually give a fuck about the deficit. They just want to make their billionaire donors happy. And so yes, obviously funding the IRS doesn't actually make any changes to our existing tax code. And there are a billion things that we need to do. But funding the IRS a little bit better is a good step one.